Hello everybody, I'm Mr. Zinzin. Today I tell you the most thrilling and horror-esque stories. Please subscribe, share and enjoy. My daughter is 3 years old. She has mentioned things she has seen in the past and I can feel that she is in touch with the spiritual side. Recently she slept at my parents' house and had a meltdown in the morning when she woke up. She told me later that she woke up and saw a black ghost. I don't know how accurate her description is, as she is 3. But she said he had no face, it was just white, and it was wearing a black costume with a hood. She told me where she saw it standing, which is only a couple feet outside of the bedroom she was in. My question is, what could this be? I grew up in that house, we all know there is spirits there but none of us have ever seen anything like that. I've only ever seen white orbs and my mother saw a young boy one time. But other than that it's mostly just whispers and a lot of noises. I do not sense any danger when I am in their home, but maybe I'm just not picking up on this being. I know she is only 3 and there will be a lot of skeptics. But I know my daughter and how she is. She isn't lying about this. She said it was the first time she's seen it. I told her not to be scared, but what else can I say, and should I do some sort of cleanse? I don't know what this spirit wants. But why is it watching my 3-year-old daughter? She is of Aboriginal descent. I don't know if that matters, I just don't have a lot of information on the spirit. I don't mind spirits in our home, but I don't want my daughter to be fearful. She has mentioned seeing spirits before and was not scared then. But it could just be because this one is different? I don't know, which is why I'm here writing this. Any advice would be helpful. Thank you. Warning. This will be a lengthy read. I'd like to start by saying I'm sort of new to YGS, so if I'm not familiar with any etiquettes I apologize in advance. Seeing as this is my first submission, I would like to give you a little bit of background information on myself so that I can try to keep all events in chronological order, which may take a while, since I've had so many. My name is Paige and I am a 20-year-old college student, living with my boyfriend Nick. For as long as I can remember, the paranormal has always surrounded me. It was a very open topic between me and my father, and later on in life my mother began to accept it a little more as she began to experience things herself, though she still tries to avoid the subject as much as possible and chalks pretty much everything up to an overactive imagination. I always felt as if I was a magnet to the paranormal, and it wasn't until I was around 8-9 years old that my father gave me an explanation, to the best of his ability. I still remember almost word for word what he said because it resonated with me so much. My father said, "All right, punk, there's something you should know. Our family is more sensitive to things than other people. It's like they're drawn to us. It's in our blood. Promise me you'll stay away from Ouija boards, tarot cards, and anything of the sort? It'll open things you want no part in." I promised him I would, and we went back to our normal, everyday lives. So now that I've given you a little bit of insight into my life, I'll start with the very first experience I can remember. At the age of 3 I lived in Pottstown with both my mother and father on the 5th floor of an apartment building. I don't remember the layout of the house very well, having been so young, but I distinctly remember that in order to get to my parents' bedroom you had to go through mine, which was fairly large. There was a doorway in the back left corner leading to their bedroom and then a doorway right next to my bed, on the right, leading to the living room. When we moved into this house, I acquired 2 imaginary friends, twin boys named Jimmy and Joey. My parents never thought anything of it. Here's where it starts to get a little weird. Unlike my other imaginary friends who I made up so to speak, I can recall their images vividly, as if they had been actual people. They were identical, on the heavier side, African American children with very dark eyes, always dressed in the same clothing, tan pants and a white button-down shirt. They quickly became my best friends and we played every single day. They were never mean to me and I never felt threatened in their presence, though I always thought it odd that when I asked them to come outside and play or go somewhere with me, they told me their mother needed them home for something. Until one day we were all playing in my room, which contained a little playhouse that people normally put outside in their yard, but as I said before, My room was pretty big for being 3, and we had no yard to put it in. Jimmy and Joey began convincing me that I could fly like a bird. The memory is a bit hazy with time, but I remember one of them saying, "Come on, just jump. I promise you, as soon as you jump we'll be flying in the sky together. We'll be like birds, just do it." So being a toddler I began climbing onto the playhouse roof, which I could never have accomplished on my own, and faced our 5th-story window. Luckily it was that exact moment that my mom decided to walk in the room and check on me, snatching me off that roof as I bent my legs to take a leap. She was bewildered as to how I had managed to get up there in the first place, but I just wailed that Jimmy and Joey had told me to do it and they should get in trouble too. My mom humored me and turned to what she thought was thin air and sent them away to juvie, telling them they weren't welcome in her home any longer. Little did she know, they never showed up again. As I got older, we shared more of the little details on it and joked about them wanting me to play with them forever, but deep down I shiver a little thinking about it. Had my mother not walked in that day, I would have killed myself at 3 years old. What do you guys make of it? I have shared on this site before and I am truly starting to believe that I am a sensitive. This is not something I want and it is not something that I like to dwell on. I have 2 daughters, they are 11 and 2. My 11-year-old has never been afraid of anything. She never wanted to sleep with a light on or climb into bed with me. Even as toddler she was independent and fearless. My 2-year-old daughter started out the same way. I could put her to bed and not hear a peep out of her. She was happy and content alone in her room. I have always sensed things and felt things for as long as I can remember. I have largely ignored these things because I don't want to feel it or deal with it. I'm not ashamed to say it scares me and I want nothing to do with it. Like I said, I have had experiences, but I believed things had been pretty quiet for me in my present home. We have lived there for about 1.5 years. Memorial Day I was home with my girls and my husband had to work. I was in my bedroom ironing. My 2-year-old was on my bed playing with blocks. My dog was snoozing on the floor. My 11-year-old was in her room doing her own thing. Suddenly, my dog jumped up from his nap barking and at full alert. At that same time the TV in my bedroom turned on. The remote was still sitting on the dresser, far out of reach of me or my daughter. I thought that was strange, but dismissed it as nothing and went about my day. This Saturday, 2 weeks after the TV incident, my 2-year-old was happily playing in her room with baby dolls. I walked out of her room to go put away some towels I was folding. I had been out of her room for maybe 3-4 minutes. This is not unusual, she will play in her room independently, when she started screaming for me and came running down the hallway and literally leapt into my arms. Something had clearly frightened her. All she would say is, "Man, scare me." Now she will not go into her room. She cries hysterically if I even try. Looking back, I now know that I sensed things about the house. There were times I thought I saw things out of the corner of my eye. One night as I was falling asleep I know I felt something tug my foot. One time I was in the laundry room and the door slammed on its own. All of these things I dismissed as my imagination. I was dozing off, so I must have been dreaming, a draft. I am rational and don't wish to have me or my family frightened, but I think it is undeniable that there is something strange. The thing is, I don't think it matters where I am, spirits are everywhere and I feel them. What I am starting to believe is my 2-year-old can sense and see these things like me and my 11-year-old cannot. Does that seem possible? Also, as a side note, I live in a neighborhood in the New Orleans area where people died during Hurricane Katrina. I don't believe anyone in the actual house died, but I know they did in my neighborhood. We are the first to live in the remodeled home since the storm. Any advice would be helpful. I am not a ghost hunter and do not seek these things out. I just don't want my little girl to be afraid. I'm a firm believer that children and animals can see or sense more than your average adult. Dogs growling at nothing, cats staring at something in empty space, etc. One of my memorable creepy moments was with a child. My sister's house had something in it, there was no doubt about that. Often, figures would pass by the kitchen door in the corridor and my sister, thinking it was me. I was always hanging out there, would find me in the living room and not on the other side of the house where she had just seen me heading. This happened so often that we didn't pay much attention to it anymore. The hot spots in her house were definitely her bedroom and the bathroom, where firmly placed objects would fly or fall off shelves for no reason, right in front of her eyes. Since her husband worked nights, she would lock herself in the bedroom with her little boy and, despite the sweltering summer heat, woke up more than once, to a freezing room, so cold that she could see her breath, and, of course, accompanied by that all too familiar feeling of dread. Note for the story ahead, in Afrikaans, "ge" means bad or yucky or gross. It's typically used by children. This specific event happened one evening when friends of theirs were visiting. They had 2 little girls. I was spending some time with the children, sitting by the kitchen door, the back door, looking out onto the backyard, from where we could see the bathroom window on the right. There was a small tree beside it, maybe 3 or 4 meters away from where we sat. It was full moon that evening. I remember, because that's why we were sitting there on the doorstep, we were looking at the moon. Then, out of nowhere, the youngest little girl points to the tree outside the bathroom and says, "Who's that witch standing there?" Of course, I am immediately creeped out, but I remain calm. I ask her, "What witch?" She's still pointing and looking. Then she makes a crooked thumb. The one standing there by the tree with her finger like this. As if in slow motion, I look towards the tree, hoping that I wouldn't see anything. I don't. However, with my hairs standing on end now, but not wanting to make a scene, I quickly usher the children back into the house and lock the door, joining the others in the living room, happy for the distraction of music and conversation. My sister and her family later moved out of that house and I don't think anything followed her, because the next house was fine. Unfortunately, the same can't be said of their current house, but that's another post. This happened when I was about 8 years old. We moved to a small mining town with a very small population. We went and looked at the houses there and there was this house that my parents decided on that gave me this creepy feeling. I still remember it like it was yesterday. There are feelings that you can't shake off and then there are the ones that stick with you for the rest of your life. Now this house was a 3-bedroom place there with a pond outside. The yard was not big at all. The one room in the house had me frightened. I did not like to walk past it or even go in there. It ended up being my sister's room. She is 3 years younger than me. Whenever I had to go in there I will have all of these mixed emotions, anger, crying, and feeling outraged. The one night my sister came to my room crying, and she tells me the lady is standing at her bed. I told her that she can sleep with me in my room. The house had an outside room which we stored our bikes and toys that could not fit in the rooms. The one day me and my sister wanted to get our bikes and I told her I am not going in that room. She was pleading with me to get our bikes, so I decided to get it and the image I saw there has stayed with me. There in the outside room on a rocking chair, we did not own a rocking chair, was this lady sitting. She had a white dress on that looked like a wedding dress. There was blood on her dress with a knife in between her breasts. She was cradling a baby and she was singing a song for the baby. Her eyes were full of sorrow, all of her emotions. I felt them. I stood there crying. I felt her fear. I got the bikes and got out of there. A few nights after that the neighbor's domestic worker was shouting and going crazy. Now here the people believe in the Takalasi and they will put bricks under their beds to give it height. So the next morning the worker comes to me and tells me that she knows I am able to see things. I have never spoken to this lady. I don't know her and she doesn't know me, and she wants me to go and have a look in her room. At first I thought she is losing it. I told her she must have me confused with somebody else. She left and a couple of minutes later came back with the lady she is working for. So the lady asked me if I could come with them. They just want to show me something. I wasn't scared of them going to hurt me or anything. I have met the children next door, so I was comfortable with going that side. The moment I went past the outside room where the domestic worker sleeps, I felt this negative, almost distracting presence of something evil. I told the lady how I was feeling and at that moment I fell to the ground as if somebody or thing pushed me. Needless to say, they didn't stay there very long after that. The activity started to happen less at our house also after the day I saw the lady in the rocking chair. We moved after about 4 months or so. It started when I was about 2. My sister is 5 years older than me and she saw them too. We weren't sure what they were or if they were really there or not, and I often wonder if I'm just a bit loopy, but anyways, I found this site about 20 minutes ago and figure why not share my experiences too. My sister, Cassie, and I used to live in Geraldton, about 4 hours north from Perth. We lived out of town, near the airport. The house we lived in was built just for us to live in and my mother designed it. My name is Demi, and I'm 18 years old. My birthday's May '96. The first time I saw it, I was playing the PlayStation 1, 1998, when I was 2. I was sitting next to Cassie, my sister, and we both saw a girl's reflection in the glass window of the TV cabinet. I turned around and there was no one there, so I dismissed it and so did my sister. From then on, every now and then in the corner of my eye I would see various different sizes of shadows in the shape on people walking through the house. It looks just like you, only completely black in color and no eyes, and no features. You can imagine at 2 years old this is really freaky. Cassie saw them as well. When I was 10 years old, Cassie being 15, we'd moved house from the one out near the airport, into town. The house we'd moved to was old, but seemed cozy, and didn't seem to have any sign of what we thought were ghosts. Several months went by and we saw nothing, and so carried on with our lives as per usual, until the day that my sister came to me telling me that she'd experienced one of the black figures at the end of her bed, calling her name, in my voice. There was another case where in the second house, in town, my sister and I were talking to each other through the gap in each of the doors, across the hallway from each other. My father had told us to go to sleep, but we, being kids, refused. We continued whispering to each other through the gaps in the doors when suddenly a black figure walked from my father's doorway into the hallway, which was right in front of my eyes, and then into the bathroom, which was directly opposite my father's bedroom. I looked at my sister and her eyes opened wider. She asked me if I saw it too. When I was 13, I moved down south, Busselton, and lived with both my sister and my mother. I saw them there as well. They'd usually just appear momentarily from place to place, in the corner of your eyes, walking through the kitchen or the lounge room. Maybe, lost souls or entities taking form and shadows as they're not able to manifest live beings? I sound loopy. I never really knew what they were or if they were just a figment of my imagination because I don't see them anymore. I stopped seeing things like that happening when I turned about 14. My sister says she sees them in her dreams, but that's different. Anything can happen in a dream. I believe they weren't harmful, but just observing or spectating. Like someone just watching a scene from a movie. They never hurt us, but we were afraid of them because they were the unknown. That's also a problem in humans, period. Fear of the unknown stops us from knowledge and growth. This is my first personal experience about something weird. I am sharing to know what you feel about it. Positive or negative comments and suggestions all are welcome. Please share your views. Background of the story: my grandmother, Aji as we call in Marathi Hindus, passed away in 2004. I was very attached to her. All these years I have missed her and wished she was here, but never had any experience. I have an 18-month-old baby boy. He has started to use basic words for communication. I or anybody in the house never taught him to say Aji as there is no one so old in the house. On December 11, 2014, while I was sitting opposite him and saying something, he looked at the wall behind me and said Aji. I was so astonished because he used that word for the first time and nobody really taught him. I ignored and kept playing with him. But he kept on repeating the same thing many times. Then I asked him to point out where Aji was and he pointed out to the wall. He even waved and gave flying kisses in the direction of the wall. Nothing moved, no voices heard, no touches. Nothing. Only my baby was behaving as if someone stood there playing with him. Later in the evening another family member reminded me that it was my grandmother's birthday, on 11th of December. In 10 years this is the first time that I forgot it. Could it be possible that she came to pay a visit? Can it be known if she does that a lot? Or is it just misinterpretation on my side? Please comment, as I really want to know what had happened. When I was about 4, I went to look at a house with my dad that ended being the house we bought and lived in until about 2 years ago when my dad sold it. I'm now 23. It was a normal, one-story family home. When we were touring the home, I walked down the hall to what ended up being my room and saw kids that lived there playing, and also saw a girl about 6 or 7 just sitting in the middle of the room staring at me. When we moved in, I can remember frequently playing with this girl. I was under the impression that she lived down the street. One day me and the girl were playing in the toy room, as we called it, and I wouldn't share my toys with her. I distinctly remember this because I always felt bad about not sharing. She got very mad and got up and stormed out of my house. That was the last time I ever saw her. I'll finish that story at the end. When I was 5, I was taking a bath with the door open and I saw an older man walk by the door. I can still remember he had on a plaid shirt and was tall and thin. I should say none of this really made any sense until I was older. Nothing really happened after that I can remember. Then when I was between the ages of 13-16, I always felt as if someone was standing behind me looking at the side of my face, but only in my room. It felt like a man. It made me uneasy, but I just brushed it off. One day I just all of a sudden woke up out of a dead sleep at probably 10 a.m. and looked at my dog, who was sitting at the end of my bed completely alert and moving her head back and forth very slowly, watching something in my room as if someone was walking. It freaked me out so bad I jumped up, swung open my door and just made myself forget about it. I never liked to believe in that stuff. My parents divorced sometime after we moved into that house, so we would go back and forth from my dad's to my mom's, and when we would get back from my mom's, my dad, a firm believer in freaking everything, would always say, "I hear noises in your room and I think it's Pawpaw." Pawpaw was my grandpa that had previously died, but I never told my dad what happened because I never really put everything together until recently, when I asked my mom if I had any friends when I was younger that would come over and play, specifically the girl who lived down the street. She told me that I never had any friends at all in the neighborhood. So I'm pretty sure my dad's house was just very paranormally active, but I'll never forget that house. I worked at Peter W. Thompson Academy, an accelerated high school for students who had trouble thriving in a regular school setting. There were lots of students with behavioral problems, serious family issues, failing subjects, and many were teen parents. It was a last resort for many kids. Peter W. Thompson was a principal at the academy who was well known for giving much of his time, energy, and funds to the school. He had been diagnosed with cancer and died many years before I began working there. To honor him, the school was renamed, and a large photograph of Mr. Thompson was hung in the Great Hall for everyone to see. One afternoon, my daughter asked if she could be dropped off at my office after school. She was in 2nd grade at the time, so I knew she could keep herself busy coloring or playing on the computer while I finished my work. When she got to my office door, she immediately asked for change to buy a snack and drink from the vending machines. The machines were located in the student break room, where kids played pool and foosball during their lunch break. I had no problem letting her go to the machines alone because all the students were gone for the day. She came back to my office a short time later, snack and juice in hand. I started some small talk with her, but she seemed to have something on her mind. I asked if she was okay, and she said, yes, but she had a question. "Mama, where is the principal's office here?" I laughed and said, "Well, you know Miss Thurman's office is right next door to mine." I thought it was strange of her to ask such a silly question since she had visited Miss Thurman's office numerous times to visit. "No, Mama. The principal's office," she said impatiently. I repeated that her office was next door. She sighed and said, "Then where is that man's office?" I thought at this point she was mistakenly referring to one of the male teachers as the principal. "Mr. Smith's office is down the hall," I said. At this point, she was getting red in the face. "No, Mama. The man who was in the break room just now. He asked if I would buy him a soda and he made me laugh. Thinking that there must have been a student still in the break room, we walked to the vending machines together. I looked around, but I didn't see anyone. I asked my daughter what the man looked like. She began describing a man with a mustache and gray hair. At this point, I began to be frightened that some stranger was wandering around the school. We left the break room so that I could call for help. As we were crossing the Great Hall, my daughter pulled my hand. "There he is. That's him. Where's his office? He was nice to me." I turned to see who she was pointing at, but there was no one there. She was pointing at the picture of Mr. Thompson, smiling down on us from his photograph. My mother passed away in a car accident 16 years ago when I was 5. I am now 21, and have 2 children of my own. Obviously, they have never seen my mother, and I do not speak to them about her, because they aren't told enough to understand yet. My oldest daughter, who was 2 at the time this happened, found a picture of my mother that I had tucked into my bedside drawer. She picked the picture up and brought it over to me and said, "Grandma." At first I thought I was hearing things, but she insisted on carrying the picture around all day long, and kept talking about Grandma. She has no reason to associate my mother with the word Grandma. Nobody in the family has even showed her a picture of my mother before. So that night when my husband comes home, we hear my daughter talking in her room. My husband goes in to tuck her back in bed, and she is waving at her closet door saying Grandma's gone. When he comes back into our room to tell me this story, just as he finished telling me, there is a loud thud across the room from us. We quickly shine a flashlight in that area and there is nothing there. The entire corner is empty, so nothing could have made that noise. So then, after we calm ourselves down and go to sleep, we are repeatedly woken up throughout the night by footsteps that we are hearing walking up and down the steps to our bedroom. The next week, my mother's sister came over to my house. As I am telling her this story, when I tell her about the loud thud that happened in my room, the second I said the word thud to her, my entire front door started shaking. It wasn't like somebody was knocking, or the wind was blowing, the entire door and door frame was shaking. It was like somebody was taking their fist and pounding on the door with all of their might. I went over to the door and checked to make sure nobody was knocking or playing games, and nobody was there.